Cheers. Hey everyone, Richard Metalfan here, and today we talk Damnation in a Day by Cradle of Filth. Now, before I get into this review, I know some people are probably wondering, why didn't I cover Lovecraft and Witch Hearts? And honestly, there's not really much to talk about with this album. I don't really have anything to say, honestly. I mean, this one just has some of the songs from like the previous couple albums that we already covered, and the disc two just one song from Cruelty, which we already talked about. The rest is just different like remixes and some covers, which the covers are actually really like. The Slayer cover is really good, and their Iron Maiden cover is really good. But as a whole, I just honestly don't really have anything to say about this. If I were to give this a score, I'd probably give this like a 6.5 out of 10 or so. I just don't really feel like talking about this. That's just me. I know a lot of people are gonna hate on me, but it's my channel. Just you have to deal with that shit. But anyway, it's not what this video is about. We're gonna be talking about Damnation in a Day. Now, this is where a lot of people, well, before I get into that, like, this is pretty much their only album to be on, the only album released through the label of Sony Records in Europe, and in the States that they're signed, this was released through Epic Records. And this is kind of where a lot of the majority of Cradle of Filth's fan base kind of think they sold out from signing to a major label, which I think that's the stupidest thing ever. Or just because a lot of people would think that they're gonna sound like freaking the mainstream shit, which is just the craziest, stupidest thing ever. I mean, I just like it. If you would just listen to like them for just the band, not for just like the label they're on, is stupid. But anyway, this album was released in 2003, and this is actually considered to be a concept album because this is basically partially based upon a poem by John Milton called Paradise Lost. And I can tell it's a concept album because this is basically the songs itself is like divided up into four parts, where it's kind of goes like into a story. And this album is like, this has 17 tracks, honestly, and goes for like a little over an hour and 15 minutes, which is kind of crazy. But yeah, and without further ado, let's get into this album track by track with part one, which is Fantasia Down, which is the opening track of the album, which is A Bruise Upon the Silent Moon, which is a very haunting intro, but it has a really great, beautiful symphony in there. It's a pretty good way to open up this album, and then it just leads into like brutality, just punches you in the face with the next track, The Promise of Fever. Just very brutally, it's just in one of the intense songs of this album. And I just thought the weirdest thing, it's around the 2.5 minute part. It has kind of like some opera type vocals, which it kind of sounds weird, just the brutality, but yet some opera type vocals, which is kind of weird, but nonetheless, The Promise of Fever is a good song. Then we get to Hurt and Virtue, which is kind of sounds a little bit different from the previous two tracks that we talked about, and it kind of has a little bit of a folky type vibe to it. When I first heard it, that's just me. And then we get to An Enemy Led to Tempest, which kind of sounds different, and just has some very beefy guitars. It's just some really good riffs and just some really great melodic parts, especially from the guitars and the bass. I honestly think the guitars and the bass pretty much stand out on this song. It's pretty good. And then we get to part two of the album, which is Paradise Lost, and we got starting off with that is track 5, which is Damned in Any Language, A Phase Onwards, which is a good song. I really like that. Then we get to Better to Reign in Hell, which musically it kind of reminds me of something I would hear from Cruelty and the Beast, and that's just kind of when I first heard it kind of reminds me of. And some really tight verses on that song. It's pretty good. And then we get to a Serpent Tongue, which kind of starts slowly and that sort of gradually builds up. But it's just some really great double bass work on the drums. It's pretty much one of the standout songs drumming wise. I think is pretty good. And some really good guitars, and it's pretty good. Then we get to Carrion, which is one of the heavier songs on the album, and the riffing is pretty good. Then we get to part three, which is The Sewer Side Up, and starting that off is The Mordant Liquor of Tears, which is a good song. I thought that's a pretty good song on the album. Then we get to Presents from the Poison Hearted. And I really love that song a lot, especially the main riff. It's just very catchy. One of the better songs off this album, or one of the best songs, I should say. And then we get to Doberman Pharaoh, which is kind of starts off with a little bit of a sitar. And it's just pretty much a very memorable song on this album. I really enjoyed that song. It's really good. And then we get to Babylon AD, So Glad for the Madness, which is one of the singles on this album. It's just some really great rhythm there, and just the intro of that song is just very grinding. I like that. And then we get to the final chapter of the album, which is part 4 in the Scented Garden. And starting that off is A Scarlet Witch Lit This Season, which is kind of like a little interlude. It's the last interlude on this album. Kind of has like a short symphonic thing. It's just really good. Then we get to Mannequin, which is another one of the singles off this album. It's just really love that song a lot, especially like the lead guitar is really great. It's just very driven. I really like that a lot. Then we get to Thank God for the Suffering, which is pretty much my favorite song off of Damnation in a Day. There's just some really great riffs and great symphonic parts. It's just a really great song. Then we get to The Smoke of Her Burning, which is kind of sounds very thrashy a little bit. It's just very upbeat, and I just really like the melodic riffs. And there's a little bit of a groove in there. And there just kind of has some of the typical black metal elements that kind of Cradle of Filth kind of experiment with. Love that a lot. And then the album closes off with End of Days. Sorry about that. Kind of has a symphonic outro. It's a pretty good way to end this album. Now, overall, Damnation in a Day is a really good album. I know a lot of people kind of have mixed feedback about it, but it's a really good album. It's listenable. You should, if I do say so myself. If I were to give this a score, I'd probably give this a solid 9 out of 10. I feel like they kind of like Cradle of Filth kind of stepped up from like the last couple records. Going into this album, I really think it's a really good album. So yeah, that's my review of Damnation in the Day, guys. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you all next review. Keep it metal.